First of all, let me congratulate you on an outstanding performance. And the manner in which you've conducted the affairs of the House. And I think that it's because of you that we're able to conclude the budget tonight in a reasonable appropriations bill in record time. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for how you think. And I think you've conducted, I think both sides can agree that you've conducted yourself very fairly and very distinguishedly. So it's a welcome to have you here in the House, sir. I will try my best, Mr. Speaker, to address as many of the different issues that were brought up by members on both sides, and hopefully, more importantly, provide some clarity to the general public on some of the statements that were being made, because I think that hopefully I will treat them as questions rather than statements and some of the things that were being said. First of all, the member of Castries East says the Prime Minister has given no indications of the timeline in his presentation. For example, no timeline has been given to the national health insurance, and then when this will come into place. And will the NHI come into place this year? And the Prime Minister has committed to moving into the OKU Hospital this year, and how will this move be funded? So on page 29 of my budget address, sir, I indicated that we hope to be in a position to institute the NHI before the end of this fiscal year. So we currently have several consultants that are working with us, and we're obviously working with the local parties with the hopes that we can pass legislation and bring this thing to a conclusion by this end of this year and implementing the national health care insurance as soon as possible. And you're 100% correct in your observation, and I think that I also indicated in my presentation that government will be undertaking the cost of moving into OKU until the National Health Insurance Program comes in, and that's why you see us moving in stages. And we hope that we can do that and be able to open the hospital by the end of this year, but we will be undertaking the expenses and the cost of moving into the hospital. Talk of renewable energy, but the opposite is done. The government secured a CDB loan for $18.6 million and received a grant for the amount of $300,000 to replace over 21,000 high-pressure sodium light bulbs with LED energy-efficient lights. And this project was cancelled. And why was the project cancelled? And why was the loan not accepted? So when we came into government, Mr. Speaker, we noticed that we had $100 million of loans from CDB. And that would represent almost a 10% increase in our overall debt. And when we went through those loans, there were several things in which we felt that we should not be using loan financing, even if it was concessionary, when we thought that there could be either private sector involvement or a different way to finance it. So two such projects really was the streetlight program. There are several private sector entities that are prepared to come in and put those lights in and be paid on the savings that we're going to have. And I didn't see why we should be borrowing that amount of money for CDB, and I'd prefer to use that monies for other projects. So while I congratulate the former government on its negotiations, but for us, given that fiscal space is so tight in terms of what our plans are, we wanted to make sure that every cent that we were borrowing, that we ultimately had to borrow that money. The second project was really the dam. And what we were concerned with is, why was the government being asked to give a guarantee when there was a revenue stream already in existence for the silting of the dam? So I'm very grateful to CDB in working with us and recognizing what our policy positions were. And in fact, all we've given is a letter of comfort to CDB on the dam, and we're investigating. I think there's 3 companies that are putting proposals together for us with regards to the lights. Prime Minister's track record for the last year's budget is poor. Have many of these above projects been started or completed? Everybody will recognize that work is ongoing. So I'm very happy that the Fairmont project is already commenced. In fact, all the equipment is on site and the clearing of the site has already commenced. We had a small problem in that the bridge going there was too small and a lot of the equipment could not make it there, but we've now hopefully resolved that issue. The member from Castries East, Mr. Speaker, also talked about the equipment from Sabusha, from GP Group, and talked about land being cleared at Vigie. And it's an interesting situation in that they have actually bought the land. And so they're actually in the process of building another property on that site. My understanding is that they're going to be building office space as well as building a hotel called a Loft is the brand that they're going to be doing there. And we're also finalizing discussions with them with regards to the Marriott Courtyard at Point Seraphin. So the equipment was being used for their project. And so that's the answer to that question. In terms of the Ritz-Carlton project, you know, the members on the other side keep bringing up this issue with regards to the CIP, Mr. Speaker, and the government's decision to change the deal with Ritz, with Range. And that instead of allowing it to be a real estate project. So how the real estate project works, Mr. Speaker, and also to the general public, is that once a project is certified and approved as a real estate project, that entity is now allowed to sell either shares or to sell an asset in that company. And that person must retain that asset for at least 5 years. And the amount that they have to invest is $300,000. In exchange, they pay an administrative fee of $50,000, and they obtain their passport. The $300,000 goes into an escrow account. So the CIP unit is supposed to approve the conditions for the setting up of an escrow account. So that means that the government must make sure that an escrow is set up that is an arrangement between the developer and the person who is making the investment to determine how the money is drawn down. So we're actually in the process of putting that in place now. So it was amazing to me that that had never been done. So the term sheet as to how the escrow account was supposed to be set up. So once that money goes in, the government only gets the administrative fee. We get nothing else. We get the project at the end of the day. So we felt that we were not ready yet for the real estate program. I had real concerns with the real estate program in terms of how it was being set up. And so by allowing the Range now to do it through a donation, and what we said is whatever clients that he's able to influence to come to St. Lucia, we will allow those funds to go into an account in Invest St. Lucia and to be lent to the developer. And so here's the fundamental difference. When it is lent to the developer, at the end of the project and after the money is repaid, the contribution that the person made, the $100,000, comes back to St. Lucia. Versus in the real estate portion, the money that the $300,000 that goes in, we never see it again. That money goes into the developer, and the developer determines how he or she is going to spend that money. So it's a fundamental principle difference, but I recognize that we're going to have to do it both ways because a fair amount of the CIP programs are being driven through the real estate portion. People like the idea because it's much cheaper because they're supposed to get their money back. And so it is very competitive in that regard. We are in discussions with Range in possibly allowing for a blend, meaning part loan and part in the real estate portion. But really what drove the difficulty with Range was our fault. So there are aspects of the CIP program that we have been struggling with. And the biggest aspect, Mr. Speaker, has been on background checks. The process that was set up was that we went through 2 different departments in the Ministry of Security. So both the CID unit was getting applications and also special branch. And the CID unit was dealing specifically with a group out of Trinidad called Impacts, and the special branch were dealing with GRCC out of Barbados. And we were really struggling in getting conclusive decisions. And so sometimes we found that CID was approving and JRCC was not approving, and vice versa. A lot of times reports were coming back to us in which both entities said they couldn't identify the individuals. And we certainly took that as being that we could not approve the application. Now, in addition to the regional security programs that we also have what's called third-party background checks. So the third-party background checks are independent companies that actually do work on the ground to find out who these people are. So they actually use their offices in wherever city those people are, and actually take photographs of their home. They confirm that they're actually working and the information that's on the application is correct. So we've been learning how to be able to use the third-party reports along with the security reports to be able to make a more educated decision. But being novices at this, Mr. Speaker, that we really were erring on the side of caution. And so the very unfortunate situation in which we had to revoke 5 passports that were issued, we had originally received approval on those individuals. And so those individuals were sent their letters to say they were given approval, and then weeks later to find out that they were then rejected. So it wasn't even to say that we got a yellow on them. We did receive a physical letter approving them. And that's where the conflict came between JRCC and Impacts. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that we're going to have to review that process. But also, I think that as solutions, we should recognize that if somebody's applying to be a citizen here, and no fault of theirs, that they're rejected for whatever reason, because there could be a multitude of reasons why they're rejected, I think having to publicize those people's names, which is in fact the regulation now, is something that we would have to give serious consideration to, because none of the other islands do that. But in our case, we have, and it is something, my understanding is that the CIP board themselves will be reviewing. So I want to say that we have seen in the last several weeks that the process time has sped up significantly, and members are right to recognize that there were 259 applications and that we only have $21 million, and there obviously is a disconnect. But we cannot report the money from the Ministry of Finance until the Ministry of Finance has received the money. And CIP cannot transfer the money until it's received the money. So until the application is actually approved and they're sent a letter, and then the monies are then transferred to CIP, which are then sent to us. And I want to alert all of us that we've also been in default. Because right now, the way that the CIP was set up, Mr. Speaker, was that we have what's called an Economic and Development Fund, Diversification Fund, in which the monies are supposed to be transferred. And we had argued when we were in opposition that there was no regulations to that fund. And in fact, there's still no regulations, and we're actually in the process of drafting them right now. So really, in the absence of the regulations, technically, CIP should not even be transferring the monies to the state. So we put everybody that we have been doing that, but we are going to rectify that by coming with an amendment to the regulations to add the piece with regards to the regulations for the Economic Fund, which will really dictate that empowers the fund to receive the monies, and also in terms of how the fund is going to disperse the fund. So even the ability of transferring the monies from the fund to invest right now, because there is no regulations, was the inability. And because of those administrative difficulties, we have had to put a pause on the Ritz-Carlton project, and we're hoping that in July that the developer and ourselves are going to be able to re-sit back down to restart the project. But I want to say it was no fault of the developer what had transpired. It was all our responsibility. I take full responsibility for it, but I believe that we're well on the way to turning this thing around and being able to recommence the project. And as I say, I think that the true definition of relationships with investors is when you have those hard times, and in terms of how you're able to be dealing with them. So I really want to thank range in particular for how they've handled this situation. And I am looking forward to getting this project restarted as soon as possible. And in terms of the other projects, they're all on stream. In the case of the Rex property, Rex, as you know, the Rex solution has closed, and they're pending to close down Papillon. My understanding is that Rex, who are moving aggressively with one company, are considering two options. My understanding is that they're going to be here very soon to let me know how they've proceeded. We have sent them off all their incentives, and we're looking forward to getting that project started as soon as possible. The Sandals project, Mr. Speaker, is also due to start very soon. All the geotechnical studies have been done. My belief is that the planning approval has been finally given. My understanding is that the landings and the ownership of landings are a bit concerned about the development. I'm hoping that we can get that situation rectified. But I am looking forward to the commencement of that particular project as well, Mr. Speaker. In terms of a credit bureau, a national consultation has been bringing in all stakeholders together to obtain feedback, and Cabinet will review proposals and make a decision on how to proceed with the credit reporting system during this financial year. The simplification of PYE, the policy is at a very, very advanced stage. In fact, there's been several presentations to Cabinet, and we're looking to be able to make an announcement this year as to the commencement of PYE. On top of that, we have also a review of the corporate tax situation, but members would also appreciate, as the member from Castries South has alluded, in that we are in dialogue with the OECD, with the Europeans, with regards to our entire financial practices, and our corporate tax particularly is going to have to make sure that it's not out of sync with our IBC Act. And so we're waiting to have those conversations before we make any formal announcements. Public Financial Management Bill, members will recall that it did come to the House and that we agreed with the member from Vieux-Fort South that we form a subcommittee of Parliament. Unfortunately, that committee, Mr. Speaker, has not met, so maybe we could lean on your good office to assist in making sure that we schedule that meeting as quickly as possible in order we can get their input and hopefully come to the House with a final position on it. The debt management strategy, in my budget address on page 48, I stated very clearly what the government's debt strategy is, and I would urge the members to review it. In the interest of time, I will not want to repeat this at this time. Mr. Speaker, a number of projects were highlighted, and I think I've brought up that. The various project programs are various stages of development, Mr. Speaker, and we are looking forward to move very quickly. The need for further explanation on the difference between the revenue from CIP passports and the amount of money received. Hopefully I've addressed that, but please let me comfort members that if in fact the passports were approved, the citizenships were approved, as I know they were, and we had received the money immediately, we actually would have exceeded the $43 million target that we had. But even with the $21 million, we are 260% higher than we were the previous year. So I'm not so sure how the members on the other side would even suggest that our CIP program has been a failure. When you want to compare St. Lucia to St. Kitts, and St. Kitts, if I'm not mistaken, has been in the business for almost 25 years, has over 12,000 citizenship programs, that kind of rolls over itself. And the member from Castries South is very, very smart to have made the point that when they decreased the price to $150,000, it really stimulated the sales. So the fact is that even some of the more established products out there are now having to discount or find a new market level because there's a tremendous amount of competition now in this CIP program. The estimates have no allocation with respect to the capital of youth development and sports, but over $1 million spent on consultants. Why is there no allocation for the capital of youth development? Members would recall that I provided an explanation for this query during the debate of the estimates. However, I will once again provide some clarification. Expenditure on sports is not zero, neither has it disappeared. Instead, certain recurrent activities were correctly reclassified as recurrent expenditure, so that these will continuously form part of our intervention and support in the area of sports, meaning that we're not treating it as a capital project. This is not something that is up to be renewed every year. We believe that this need to be vested simply in our recurrent expenditure. So sports equipment, supplies, and material at 100,000. Maintenance and operations of playing fields to 100,000. Youth development and elite athlete assistance program, 300,000. And surely members of opposite will agree that this is a more appropriate classification for this type of expenditure. The member from Dennery North, querying once again on what is going on in the distress fund. This should be reinstated, sir. As I explained, Mr. Speaker, the members during the debate on the estimates, provision has been made for these estimates for the emergency situations when they arise. The government, which cares for all its people, will always stand ready to provide assistance to its people during times of emergency. So the money is there, and the request program, the way that you access it is exactly the same. It's in the it was in the contingency fund, yes. Member from Vieux-Fort South, where was the $150 million loans from the Taiwan? I think that the member from Castries North hopefully addressed that, in that $100 million is going to be going through SLASPA. SLASPA is the one that will be taking on that loan responsibility, and they will report it through their traditional mechanisms. And the $50 million will be coming through other financing, the roads, etc. This will be reported once the loans are executed and pursuant to the Finance Administration Act of 1501. The Minister of Finance will be required to seek the authority of this Honourable House by resolution prior to the disbursements of these loans. Accordingly, members will have the opportunity at that time to get more information. Vieux-Fort North Water Supply Project, did the government of St. Lucia cancel the loan from the CDB for the project which was already approved? And if so, why was this done? Mr. Speaker, I don't know why the member continues to mislead the House. On page 480 of the estimates of expenditure, it is very clear that the source of financing for the Vieux-Fort Water Supply projects is as follows. $1,037,500 in bonds, a CDB grant of $1.3 million, and a CDB loan of $2.47 million, which is a total of $4.834,500 million. Is therefore correct to suggest that the loan was canceled? I'm not so sure it would be. I was really hoping that the member from Vieux-Fort South would be here, because I certainly don't like bringing these things up in his absence. He made a statement, and if I can make a document to the House. There's two separate documents, sure. So I'm going to beg everybody's indulgence, and Mr. Speaker, certainly if you remember, and if I'm in any way misleading the House, I would like to be corrected. The member gave a presentation with regards to the tax, the airport tax, and indicated and used an example of a flight from St. Lucia to Antigua to indicate that we actually were collecting, I think it was $140 US that he indicated that we were collecting. So what I've provided for the members is an online from LIAT, which gives the breakdown of all the taxes. And I think that, again, and I wouldn't expect the member from Vieux-Fort South to be that okwa with the airline business. But the taxes, you can't take the tax from St. Lucia to Antigua and just double it and think it's going to be the same taxes from Antigua back to St. Lucia. So that's the first mistake. So the taxes, when you calculate them, and everybody will see them for themselves in the calculation, is that on a return ticket that you will end up paying $93.90 in taxes to Antigua, and you'll end up paying $83.73 in taxes from St. Lucia. So this is a very, very important point. US dollars, right? But previously, the tax that we would have paid in St. Lucia would have been the $25 plus the VAT of the $13.75. Whereas Antigua would have been paying the $93. And so here's a question. Why would St. Lucia continue to be the cheapest place when it wasn't benefiting us? So everybody else had raised their taxes. And everybody's raised their taxes on average in the Caribbean to $85. And we felt that we were falling short. And so that was tax revenue that was foregone. And the question is, did LIAT, when we were at $25, put on more flights to St. Lucia? Or did they make it cheaper to come to St. Lucia? Did we see any intrinsic benefit because of that? And even when we apply it to the international flights, when you compare St. Lucia to Antigua from New York, the airfare was exactly the same airfare from New York to Antigua as it was from New York to St. Lucia. So the question becomes, Mr. Speaker, the rest of the money, who was getting it? Now, I know that the members on the other side understand that to some extent, but they have been playing naive and dodging the issue to the general public. They have been trying to convince everyone, Mr. Speaker, that when they were going to do the airport project at Honora International Airport, that they were getting it for free. Okay? Because it wasn't going to cost them anything, and they were not even going to have to take on the debt responsibility. So how did they do that? They appointed a third party to what we have called a special purpose vehicle, meaning that they now run the airport for a prescribed time. I think the time that was in the deal with the IFC was 30 years. And as you see by what we brought to the House, is that they had already approved increasing the tax by $55. So that entity, in addition to running our airport, was going to be given $55 of our tax money per passenger. Right? Huh? What happened? They keep the money and they run it, and they gave you a promise that what they were going to do is repatriate you money once they make profit. But I can tell you this, they'll never make profit, because they would have increased all the cost and find all kinds of different fees, and they would have eaten up that $55. Yes. No problem. Have no problem. Okay? But the fact is, that's what was going on. So, Mr. Speaker, we have no interest on this side, because the question that we asked was, what's the added value? If in fact $35 was more than going to cover the cost of the load, in fact the $35 is going to generate 20% more money than we really needed, why would you go and give them 55? Okay? That you're going to go to 55. So when you go to the $55 million, we are saying 35. Right? And the goal is that we now can get access to that extra $20. That extra $20, we're saying, let's put that extra $20 into the highway, that north-south highway. Or let's put the $20 in investing into the cruise ship terminal. But we're getting more for it. Why would I give a third-party entity who I'm questioning what added value are they bringing, other than we can say we don't have to carry the debt? So what we have done is we've gone out and negotiated in order to be able to get a loan in which SLASPA can get the loan. Okay? There's not going to be any government guarantee on the loan. SLASPA will be taking the loan. And that we have passed in this House the ability for SLASPA to allocate parts of the $35 or the full amount of the $35 to pay back for that loan. Now I want to bring in another subject, because the member from Vieux-Fort South also talked about, why would the Taiwanese government give us a $150 million loan? When we were in opposition, we said that we felt that we needed to change our relationship with the Taiwanese. And that this idea that we're only a one-way relationship in which the Taiwanese were giving us monies for the CDP on an annual basis. We want to see more investment from Taiwan. We want to create more opportunities for Taiwanese businesses to do well in St. Lucia. So that's why we've now negotiated a double taxation treaty. We've also been able to negotiate, Mr. Speaker, for St. Lucian manufacturers to be able to export their products to Taiwan duty-free. And we're now doing many more investment trips to try to get now more Taiwanese companies to invest, and also in particular in agro-processing. And we want to be able to develop a stronger relationship with Taiwan. And what we're saying to Taiwan is we want to be of strategic importance to you. We want you to know that we are a foothold in the western part of the world for you. And we want to be able to be used as a portal to be able to support your businesses in America, in Canada, in Central America, and Latin America. And if we in fact have projects, and given that you're a friendly government, we would like to see you lend the money. And in turn, that you can use your construction companies to be able to get the job. And so that is the exchange. That's the secret. You know what it is called? Mutual respect. That's what it's called. And it's called about a win-win situation. And it's to stop living off of aid. Stop living off of aid. Let's find the way in which we can make sure that people who are making a contribution to us, that we can look them in the eye and we know that they're getting a benefit as well. And that benefit is not about diplomacy. Our diplomacy should never be for sale. But that's the part that many people don't understand with Venezuela. I respect Venezuela for being an independent country. I respect Venezuela for some of the programs that they have done. But as a friend and as a person who supports democracy and the rule of law, I cannot support what's taking place in Venezuela. And I would certainly hope that if St. Lucia acts that same way, that our other brothers and sisters would act the same way. And as I said, from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I am surprised on the other side that given what's taken place in the opposition in Venezuela, that they would support that. Can you imagine if we even thought of doing that in this country, Mr. Speaker? And we support the sovereignty of the people of Venezuela as well. We believe that there has to be a local solution to the problem, but it does not take away from the fact that if you have to call a spade, if a friend in our region who is signed up to an accord that says that we are going to recognize and practice democracy and the rule of law, and they break that, you must say so. I think that China, why do you support China? Huh? The whole world supports China. So, sir, when we talk about the need for health care insurance in this country, Mr. Speaker, and why would we do that? And when I hear members on the other side say that they're going to, and I love to hear that, they're going to run on a platform that if they get into government, they're going to provide universal health care insurance. Universal health care. But they couldn't even open the hospital. Their own studies. In fact, I was so grateful. I was so grateful to the member for Castries for providing us with these two documents. Because it only just reconfirms everything that we were saying. You know, in it, Mr. Speaker, on the last page, it talks about what's the additional recurrent cost for the spending request. So in order for us to be able to open Owen King would cost $73 million. And these are numbers that were done in 2015. They have here budget estimates for 2016 moving forward. Yeah, I've read it. Right? The note says assumed opening date is September 2016. $7 just for that year. The next year would be the 72.870 million, and then it increases slightly to $73 million for 18-19. That's not what it says? No. I'm sorry if you can't read your own document. The document. You all have the document. The document here says, Mr. Speaker, the document says 2016-2017 budget estimate, and it's projecting here. It says that we're going to open up in September of 2016. So if you open up in 2016, it remains a budget year until to March 31st. And so therefore that period of time would cost $7,316,000. The following year, the full allocation would now come on for the year, and the full allocation is $72 million. Sorry? Well, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. Yeah. So the assumption to you, Mr. Speaker, and also to the general public, the assumption here is that they're estimating that to run Victoria is $35 million. And so therefore, by closing down Victoria, that we're going to save that $35 million, okay, and move it into to cut in half. So we're still the $40 million short, right? So where were they going to get the $40 million from? And they said, remember, they're not going to tax the general public. What they're going to do is they're going to provide universal health care. You know where they're going to get the money from? They were going to increase the NIC contribution. So the NIC contribution was going to go from 10% to 15%. So that's a tax. He's right. The insurance premium is a tax. Okay? Right? No new taxes for this budget year. All right, for this budget year. Okay? But so is an NIC contribution. And here's the fundamental difference, Mr. Speaker. The fundamental difference between the two issues, and I'm speaking slowly because it's an important point to be able to make, is that if you make the NIC contribution, all we do is give government the money, and then government can pay the bills at the hospital. But the people who could not afford health care today, under that new system, will not be able to afford health care tomorrow. They will only be satisfied knowing that there's a better hospital. But they're in no better position because the government is not going to be any closer to being able to provide that universal health care. That money that you're going to get from NIC is not going to be able to provide enough money to do that. Whereas when you now give people insurance, the difference is, and again, this is a fundamental difference between the Labour Party and United Workers' Party. United Workers' Party believes in putting money back into people's pocket. So it's not just about the physical ching, ching, ching. It's about the ability that the money is in your pocket and you choose how to spend it. And so when you get an insurance card, that's like putting money in your pocket. You get to decide which doctor you want to go to. You get to decide which hospital you want to go to. Okay? And you never have to worry about whether you can afford it or not. But the way the Labour Party wants it, the universal healthcare system they're looking for, is one in which the state will never be able to meet the full demands of the people. And therefore, somebody has to play God. Somebody has to be that decision maker to decide who is going to get and who is not going to get. And again, it becomes this issue of going to beg politicians. That's not what this government is about. Even when you now look at the NICE program, what was a NICE program? That you're going to set up a structure in the Prime Minister's office outside of the Public Service Commission, and one man making the decision as to who you're going to hire, and you don't even respect the people enough. You give them a one-year contract. Why? Is it because they have to come back and beg you every year? So every year you get to evaluate as to how loyal they were? Why would you leave yourself open to that form of criticism? Why wouldn't you hire the people through the Public Service Commission? Okay, that's the difference. That's the difference. And they put people, nobody was fired from the NICE program. Your own program. You know, Mr. Speaker, the opposition keeps on saying that we fired the NICE workers. Repeatedly, the contracts came to an end and the program came to an end. And we changed the program to the National Apprenticeship Program. And you know, the member from Castries East made the point, and he brought up that we have $7 million last year going to Ojo and $10 million this year going to Ojo. The money is not all going to Ojo. Whatever people get employed in Ojo for the first year and a half that we're going to contribute in the first year, 1,000 EC dollars towards the people they employ. The next thing that we're going to do is after the first year, we then pay for another 6 months. They get paid $500. And that's for all the new workers for the first 3 years. And that's in order to give an incentive to create more jobs for young people so that we are helping subsidize the training. I would rather them train the person. And look what a fantastic job they've been doing, Mr. Speaker. Why can't, for once, the opposition just acknowledge a good project? You sit on one side, Mr. Speaker, and say that we need to diversify from tourism. Here we are diversifying. This is an industry that didn't exist in St. Lucia. We've created the industry. We had to convince the people to come and invest in St. Lucia because Austin and other places were offering them even bigger incentives. But because of their confidence, not in Allen Chastanet, I don't want to take that credit. It was their confidence in the young people of this country. That's why they came here. And how did they know about that? Because they owned the company Yodel. And they had been employing young people here, 150 of them a year, who excelled and said they knew that capacity was within the young people of this country. And I support those people. So this idea that my government is a government that doesn't support the young people, that we are a government that only supports foreign investors, let's go back and get a little exercise on economics. And you know what? On one side, I am not celebrating the Nobel laureates. But on the other side, they're not listening to the Nobel laureates. Because Sir Arthur Lewis's policy was based on what? Economic development by invitation. What does that mean? In order to expand the capacity of your country, you need to be able to get new investment. Okay? And it's to encourage foreign investment in your country. Foreign investment does not compete against your local investment. Foreign investment allows the capacity of your country to grow. So when we get some bigger hotels in St. Lucia, who benefits? The taxi drivers benefit because there's more people to carry. The farmers benefit because there's more people to feed. More people, more staff going back and forth from transportation. More money in circulation. More tours being offered. But guess what the big winner is? All those solutions we want to be able to help through village tourism, that we want to hold their hand and create an incubator system in order to develop them more. They benefit because the cost of traveling to St. Lucia comes down. The cost of bringing goods to St. Lucia starts coming down because you start creating some critical mass. The contribution to those companies are making to our utility companies now makes it cheaper because there is more money in circulation. So the fact is that the growth of your international market and your business and your investment is in order to be able to facilitate growth in your local market. But you see, that's the problem. They always miss that part out. And as the member from Castries South East showed, here they are criticizing sandals and playing politics with something they know better about. Because guess what? It's an easy thing to do. But hidden in the dark corners of cabinet, they approved incentives even to a greater degree than what it had. But that's the duplicity that we've come to expect from the Labour Party. The idea is that the Labour Party continues to say that we want to stop them from speaking. Mr. Speaker, that's the furthest thing from the truth. In fact, we want to encourage them to speak. We want them to be able to encourage them to participate. But what we would like to be able to do is when we come to this House and we're going to conduct the business of the people, let's put politics aside for once. Let us be able to celebrate something that's done well. And when we talk about the European blacklist, you know, I would have expected from the leader of the opposition, because there were times when I was in opposition and I called him on issues of international. And I said, we will not say anything. We will take the lead of the government. To suggest to anybody that our government implemented any kind of policy that caused us to be on the list is ridiculous, okay? It's absurd and it's disingenuous. In fact, Mr. Speaker, irresponsible. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the process started in January of 2016. They were still in government. And the first contact after January 2016 was made in the summer of 2016. And then we were given 3 weeks to be able to sign a letter. So I want to say there was no policy of ours. In fact, the EU, I'm still trying to figure out why the EU, Mr. Speaker, is involved in this process. Because this is a process that the G20 countries assigned to the OECD. And in fact, we have been working, in fact, the opposition when they were in government also were working with OECD through their issues. These are the same issues. So on one hand, I have every right to say to the Europeans that I don't agree with the process. How can you accuse people of things without proving that they're wrong and putting them on a blacklist? It's almost like you're threatening people. But yet you come from a country in which you practice the rule of law and democracy. So St. Lucia is not the only one to voice that objection. We all have. And we're going to continue to voice that objection. But in the meanwhile, I recognize the power of the European countries. And if they put you on a blacklist, you have to respond. And so I very much look forward to being able to work through this process. Look at our IBCs, our incentives, our free zones, all of these things, because I don't believe that we're doing anything to harm European taxation. But in the next year, we will be able to resolve that. We've given a timeline to go through the process, and I look forward to being able to deliver on that. Another thing that the opposition keeps bringing up is the national trust. And so I want to, while I've made it myself hopefully clear, but I could never repeat it enough times, Mr. Speaker. In our deliberations with the National Trust, it became very obvious that the National Trust had become very comfortable in its position, and that it has a lot of assets in which it's generating no revenue off of those assets. And so in my discussions with them, we'd ask them for what their plan is. And the National Trust gave us a plan in which they were proposing to build a conference facility on Pigeon Island. So where the museum is, they wanted to convert that into a conference facility. They wanted to expand a shop at the beginning of the gate. And they also wanted to move their offices to Pigeon Island. So my government opposed that. We felt that that was not going to generate any money, and that there were better ways and better things that they could do to generate the money. And so therefore, we had a meeting with them and we agreed that we would take away the subvention because the subvention is not supposed to be used for recurrent expenditure. And we've made it very clear to the National Trust. In fact, I had the opportunity of meeting the new board and reiterated our position. Any capital projects that they have in which there can be a shown rate of return on it, then we will support them. If they are critical projects that have to be done, that are deteriorating or causing the destruction of any of our assets, in the famous words, our patrimony, we will be very happy to help support that. So I think there's a project we're working on at Sir Arthur Lewis to be able to fence the area. As it pertains to the Derek Walcott, you know, I believe that the people that really are at fault are the opposition, because the opposition went and made all kinds of promises to the National Trust about how they were going to build this facility and promising them all the money. I have no idea where that money is coming from. Okay, $14 million. Right? So the only amount of money that we saw from the Taiwanese, I think, was like $2 or $3 million that we saw allocated to the project. So I don't know where the rest of the money, the $10 million, was supposed to come from. It was a phased project, but nobody had the money. So it was very, very similar to what was taking place at the St. Jude's Hospital. So let me move to the St. Jude's Hospital. Again, I assume this has already been made a copy of the document of the House, and I can make reference to it. So if I can go to page 18 on point 2. It says that the project was initiated as a result of an emergency aid and did not go through the normal project development cycle of similar, page 18, projects which is historically 5 to 10 year period prior to the physical implementation. This resulted in the initial policy direction of a basic renovation of the old site and a new development of a new one through a public-private partnership. The International Finance Corporation of the World Bank was engaged to work with the government to facilitate the financing and implementation of a new facility. The IFC counterpart, Ms. Michelle Otti, initially both short and medium-term solutions were being implemented simultaneously. Project implementation commenced on the original site in September of 2010 with minimal funding to facilitate only the short-term solution. I think that was Mr. King, the Minister, the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance at the time, had agreed to, was to just rebuild what had been burnt down. The technical work. The planning and design of the construction had to be undertaken simultaneously by breaking up into subcomponents, which is not normally the preferred mode of implementation, but this was necessary in an effort to progress quickly. So you remember that members on the other side, Mr. Speaker, continued saying, we kept working. Okay? And you had the member from Laborie who started off at $36 million 1 year and ended up at $136 million, $175 million by the end of it. Because you know what they were doing? They were just working. I'll be happy. The change in policy direction in August of 2011 resulted in replanning exercise to facilitate the permanent reoccupation of St. Jude Hospital. However, financing was not available to meet the requirements of this new direction. As such, the PMU developed a strategy to disaggregate the outstanding works into smaller components and into thematic areas to qualify for targeted sources of funding, such as water and wastewater components, renewable energy components, medical equipment components. This resulted in the project management unit preparing various proposals for funding, i.e. to the Mexican government, the German government, the World Bank, the United States government, and Taiwanese government. Construction on site from 2010 to 2014 was directly related to the limited funds available through government of St. Lucia. I want to keep going. It says, during the period of 2012 to 2015, the availability of funding dictated the pace of works on the ground. Despite the request by the project management unit for adequate financial resources to progress work on the site, the fund, this is 2012 to 2015, funds were made available were inadequate, and work on site was restricted to approve funds for the respective financial years due to budgetary constraints. Now, I have to say to you, is if I found myself in that position, what I would do is open up what I could open and focus the resources, the limited resources, on at least building a facility that you can cause the people to have moved over from where they were over here. But you know what? 5 years went by, and they kept working. But it wasn't really working, it was spending. There's a difference between working and spending.
Honorable Prime Minister, let me just advise you, according to the standing order, you have 10 minutes left.
The PMU advised the consultant Halcro Group Limited on the available budget for the respective years. The consultant was charged with the responsibility to identify a feasible scope of works out of the overall scope of works to match the available funds. As such, although more work could have been progressed in the period, the work completed was restricted to the contracts issued based on the available funds. So if I can speed up and go to page 23, the last paragraph. Proposals were received from the Accreditation Canada for the commencement of the accreditation process, which was scheduled for January-February of 2017, based on January 2017 hospital transfer. So you have one document that said that we're going to move in July of 2016, and now we have another document that says that we're going to be moving in February. And it, yes, half an hour.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to invoke Section 4210 to 3210 to allow the member for Micoud South an additional half an hour to complete his presentation.
Honorable members, the question is that Standing Order 4210 be invoked and to grant the Prime Minister and member for Micoud South an additional 40 minutes in which to complete his presentation. I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Thank you. I'm going to be quick because I know that some members are tired. We've been here for 3 days. Also, proposals received from the Accreditation Canada to assist the St. Jude Hospital with the development of the relevant policies and procedures and procedure manuals. This activity was scheduled to commence in July of 2016. Accreditation Canada also assisted in identifying a suitable contractor to assist St. Jude Hospital with the transfer from the stadium to the new facility. Dr. Poit has been reviewing this and has signed off on the relevant proposals. The development, here's where the interesting part becomes now. But you're the one who made it the public document. Well, you know, I know, but I'm just glad for the transparency. Point 13. The Development Control Authority approval. From the inception of the project, the Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Physical Development, Mr. George James, was written to, I need the copy, appraised of the project, and a request was made for the assignment of an officer to support throughout the process of seeking approval. This process of seeking approval was deferred as initially basic renovations were being done, not resulting in an increase in the existing footprint. So let me explain what that means. When the project was originally started, because it was not going to be expanding the project, but just really retrofitting what had been burnt and fixing it up and modernizing it, there was not a necessary for planning approval. But it's when the project now changed in scope in August of 2011, once you did that, the plans had to be submitted and getting for planning approval. This process of seeking approval was deferred. As time progressed and the new policy direction was being affected and the associated funding became available, Halco Group Limited proceeded to work with the various referral agencies to ensure review and approval of the facility. When the project phases had been confirmed and it was clear which components had been financed, final approval was sought. The approvals were received from the referral agencies, fire service, health department, etc. Subsequent to this, the final submission was made, including all relevant and referral agency approvals. The application was recommended for approval. However, the Ministry of Physical Development informed that the board has requested a presentation to the project to the approval. The PMU has agreed to the presentation and was awaiting information on its schedule. So, on April 22nd, 2016, I'll be happy to make this a document to the House, the Development Control Authority wrote to the then PS and basically said the Development Control Authority considered, now remember, that's April 2016. This project has been going on since 2010. Yeah. And they came in end of 2011. Kindly be informed that on April 20th, 2000, the Board of DCA deferred your application pending resolution of the following. A presentation by the Planning Department of Ministry of Finance on the proposal. Submission of air conditioning and circulation system indicating ventilation solutions for all the rooms, including the ground floor for toilet and the dialysis building, ground floor toilet warehouse, toilet 103 ambulance and monitoring building, toilet washroom 203 and morgue building, toilet 201 in the gym, the first floor toilet 102 and 105 and male and female washrooms and floor houses. Several of the ground and first floor east wing, several on the ground in the first floor surgical wing, first floor room 312 dormitory west wing, ground floor kitchenette and warehouse. Landscaping plan is to be provided. Site plan to be amended to reflect the following. All carriageways to be dimensioned a minimum of 18 inches for the two-way traffic. All parking bays to be dimensioned to DCA standards, but they weren't. And that's the problem, they weren't. Setbacks to be included from the furthest most project of the building. So all I'm saying to you, this list goes on, and I'm going to save everybody the time, because the member from Castries East is making the point. He's saying that if we knew this, and if I'm misquoting you or misinterpreting you, please let me know, why would we have had to do a study? Because these are the things, sorry. Do what? Okay, so when we read the reports, and clearly we understood that all that was happening is that people were trying to progress the project. So to figure out where we were, and not only that, the things that were pointed out in the DCA, Mr. Speaker, were only things that were obvious to the naked eye. And so when we actually did the study, we discovered a lot more problems. And the fact is that the United Workers' Party and our administration as a cabinet, and I want to say this, as a cabinet, because this wasn't a decision by any one minister. This came to cabinet. And the collective mindset of all these men and women here said, you know what? Stop. Get an assessment. Let us figure out what the full merit is going to be and how we're going to make this work for the people in the South. So once, you know, that's another interesting thing. Why was the things in other people's places? Why would the government of St. Lucia buy items and then allow and cause people to have the things not in their possession? And they had already paid for the items, Mr. Speaker, but that's for another day. So, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about, let me just continue right here. Where is it? If I can go to page 27, another interesting thing. VAT. Follow up on the ministry's decision with respect to the payment of VAT. It was previously indicated that VAT legislation was going to be amended to cater to VAT due to government projects. I'll get there if you want me to read it. In the interim, a letter needs to be furnished by the ministry of the relevant consulting contractor. So here is it that all the projects were VAT liable. In principle, VAT payments are still outstanding for the major contracts, especially payments due to the Customs Department for the clearance of goods imported. But both parties have continuously exempted VAT on construction of hotels and developments. So here we have a project which is really in its infancy, a critical project. Why even from bureaucracy perspective tied up? What was the difficulty in just going to cabinet and saying, let's consider this as a critical development and allow it to be the VAT exempted? But that simple thing could not be done. 2210. Let me. Okay. Equipment and materials in storage. During the implementation of the project, it became necessary to store construction materials and associated equipment. All materials and equipment stored are the responsibility of the relevant contractors until incorporated into the workers or installed. Halco Group provided the details of equipment and materials in storage on site and off site. Medical equipment procured through the project currently in storage include equipment supplied. I get this, but you're not asking people to hold stuff for 2 and 3 years. And in fact, when we went there, it took forever to be able to get the inventory list as to where everything was. And in fact, things were there and they had spoiled already. So the question becomes, why would you have ordered all of that stuff up front, paid out for all those money for the stuff, if you were not ready to use it? I mean, so that's all the problem is. What it does, it continues to talk about the complete mismanagement that was taking place. So, Mr. Speaker, you can see when we use the words that we inherited a mess, we're not in any way over-exaggerating the situation. Even their own reports show, right, that this thing was not being managed properly. And the fact is that when you now start going through the amount of the expenditure, Mr. Speaker, it becomes even more apparent. So when you have members on the other side making all kinds of allegations about accountability of money and how well they are, the people of St. Lucia deserve to have an independent audit done in order there can be a record for everybody to see what has happened. And if in fact somebody has acted irresponsibly with the state's funds and with those donors' funds, then they must be held accountable. That's all it is. That's all it is. I want to make sure I'm getting everything done, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to go to Mr. Speaker, very quickly, because, and again, my good friend, the President of the Republic of Laborie, is not here. And he keeps repeating himself that this land that we're giving away to DSH. So let us reiterate the position that the only land that is being leased to the DSH group is the land that's going to be occupied by the horse racing track. The remaining amount of land is going to be sold, and depending on the location of the land, will be sold for either $60,000 US an acre or $90,000 US an acre. Okay? The horse racing track is expected to occupy around 250 acres. So that's what we're talking about. The remaining amount of land, which there's another 300 acres in that area, is going to be sold. The area of land that we're now talking about by Il Pirata is, I think, around 150 acres of, no, it's actually 33 acres, if I'm not mistaken. And what we're proposing to do is to be able to reclaim land. Because remember, part of that area in Il Pirata was already reclaimed. Okay? Sorry? No, 200 acres. But you know what's interesting again? Because the member from Dennery North made a point where he said, I don't want to misquote him. There it is. I can. Basically, he was talking about transparency and accountability. So again, this has already been made a document of the House, which is in February 9th of 2016. I remember the government goes in May, right? Your good friend, Mr. Robert Ainsworth. Right? Absolutely. I mean, I'm happy to read the whole letter. It is a document of the House. I would like to confirm that at a cabinet meeting on February 8th, 2016, it was agreed by the cabinet that upon receiving written confirmation from the Lifestyle Group PLC of the level of the investment being made by it and each of its subsidiaries incorporated the date hereof and those incorporated in the future, their joint venture partners' licenses for completion, the entire proposal for the cabinet, including the purchase or acquisition of La Paradis, Lands or DCSG Company, and proof that the medical products you intend to manufacture in St. Lucia meet FDA and or similar standards, you will have the full support of the government of St. Lucia in order to meet your objectives within the proposed framework. Guess how much they were looking to give them? 1,000 acres, you know. In addition, never saw it. Doesn't matter. But you promised to give him 1,000 acres. It will include the concepts. So what is the difference between selling land to DSH and saying to a person you're going to give them permission to buy land for 1,000 acres? In addition to that, that same person, I mean, what's amazing to me, Mr. Speaker, and that's where I'd like the honesty. If you're going to criticize DSH because they're going to lease 200, or if you want to exaggerate it, 300 acres of land. Okay? 300 acres, not 1,000. Okay? No, it doesn't say that. But see, because you have the wrong agreement. I keep telling you that. But you don't want to listen. No, but you see, there's all kinds of fake news out there. And all I'm saying to you is when the agreement has been formalized, we will make the agreement public so you don't have to worry about that. Okay? Because that's how our government operates. Okay? So we have a framework agreement because we were in negotiations. We are now almost getting close to be able to sign off on our deals, and I can tell you that the intention was always to lease the lands for the horse racing track. I find these proposals, let me get here. What's amazing in this agreement is waivers of personal income tax for the boards and senior management, waiver of corporation tax for the development company, its subsidiaries and everything, approval for the CIP, exemption from all forms of VAT and import duty for the construction purposes, and any of the joint venture partners, nightclubs and sports facilities and private members clubs. I don't know what a private members club is, but anyway. And importation of all and any materials, including but not limited to the building materials, etc. Planning permission for each of the elements of the development will be approved with due dispatch of each submission once the application conforms with the laws of St. Lucia. That the proposed development, where appropriate, will fall within the Tourism Incentives Act. The government will facilitate the establishment of an investment as a CIP-approved investment under the provisions of the Citizenship by Investment. Now, I'm saying all this, and then, the classic one, again, to really talk about the hypocrisy of the opposition, is point 14. The government confirms the rights of the developer to extract and develop the natural resources, if any, that are discovered within the culture of any of the lands owned by the developer and its subsidiaries. And we didn't give it away. We didn't give it away. Doesn't matter. Okay. And DSH is buying land. Yes, they are. You keep saying they're not buying land, but they are buying land. All they're doing is leasing the horse racing track. As indicated above, the government may be deemed it prudent to enact the special legislative provisions. This letter, in its terms, to be kept confidential as between the parties and your intended joint venture. So all I'm saying to you is, when members on the other side want to say things, I'm hoping that the public of St. Lucia will now start seeing them for the bare truth of what they are. They say one thing when they're in opposition and do something completely different when they're in government. We show it repeatedly, over and over and over again. So let me say, I want to wrap up. Why is my government emphasizing growth? Because growth is going to help us build resilience. We have seen repeatedly, year after year, that we've had no growth. The member from my favorite place, Vieux Fort South, made again another statement, Mr. Speaker, and again, if I'm misquoting him, I hope I'm not. He said that in his term that they had growth of up to 3%. Right? Now there's two growth rates. There is what's called growth rates in constant prices and market prices. So the growth rate that we're recording, which is a 2.5%, that's constant prices. Now the World Bank and IMF do it in market prices. So we'll do both. So when the minister within the Ministry of Finance made the quote of 3%, what he was quoting was the market prices. So the market price growth for this year was 3%. Sorry? Yes, last year was in real terms. Market terms, 3.4. And then the year previously to that was minus 0.9%. And then it was 3.6%, minus 0.13%, minus 0.6%. Okay? Now in growth rate that the member from Vieux Fort South congratulated me on using that number was 2.5% this year. Yes. No, in market. No, in constant prices. Constant prices. 2.5% this year. 1.7% last year. 1.8% the year previously. 0.5% before that. Minus 0.2%. 0.7% and 0.8%. So all I'm saying is that our country has not been doing well. In fact, the ECCB has said in order for us to do well, we need 5% per year. At minimum is the target that they've given us. So we must agree that we're not achieving it. So the fact is that the Labour Party, if you go back even to the 10 years previously to them, had, other than 1 year, which was World Cup cricket, and the peak of the world growth is when they did well. Now remember, between 1998 and 2006 was considered to be the fastest growth period in the history of the world. And St. Lucia could not even grow by 1.5%. Okay? We only had 1 year where we had just about, I think it's 5% growth. So, what does bananas have to do with 2000? So, all I'm saying to you is that here we go again, where it's okay for them to lie. It's okay for them, Mr. Speaker, to provide false information. But I'm pleading with the people of St. Lucia to see past what is being said here. That every single dollar more that we have to pay as a country in interest payments is $1 less we have for playing fields, $1 less we have for the healthcare system, for education, and to help our people, and to invest in infrastructure in our country. But they can't understand that. They just keep incurring more and more debt. They need to have surplus and primary recurrent budgets. The ministers, they keep saying that, but they forget that when they get into government, because they never practice that when they're in government. They never do. All they do is just keep rolling over the debt. They don't have a sinking fund. They're not accountable for the money they're borrowing. So when you talk about now having targeted taxes, it's because the people's confidence in the government and politicians is bottom. Nobody has any faith in us. Nobody believes anything that politicians say. They think we come to the House and talk about how much we love and appreciate people, but we do something completely different. So my government came in here based on the need to be realistic and to show people that we're truthful. So we're going to take the gas tax, put it in the lockbox, and we're only going to spend it on the roads. And every year the minister will come from infrastructure and tell you where he spent the money. Okay? No matter where the lockbox is, the money is being spent right now with the minister. It's not being spent on anything else. And it will go into the lockbox as soon as we now confirm the loan for the $50 million. That's where the money is going. No, it was spent $14 million. Agreed. Okay?
And the Marshall Road will be there.
So when you have growth, everybody else benefits. And the economy benefits, and small business people. So now, where is the passion of my government to help local business people? Because that's the cry that we don't. The St. Lucia Development Bank.
And I'm having to tell
What we're doing in the marketing board in order to be able to give contracts to farmers. What we're doing in village tourism. What we're going to be doing with TIPA. The improvements that we're going to be putting into the cash-freeze market. What we're going to do in terms of fixing up the infrastructure to allow small business people to survive. But more importantly, by reducing the VAT by 2.5%, all those small business people's costs went down, including their rent. And if we now can grow our tourism product and become more competitive, so I was so happy to hear when the Minister of Tourism spoke about that American Airlines has announced that they're going to put on a second flight, and I'm very happy to report to the House, no MRG, no, from Miami. Yes, so you get to leave early in the morning, and you can come back late in the night. JetBlue will come from Fort Lauderdale as soon as they finish the construction. I promise you that. Because I know you're a JetBlue fan. So, I want to close, and although I tried to find, I don't know where it went to. I think I'm going to spare the member. Oh, here it is. This is the member from Castries East speech. Yes, last year. And Mr. Speaker, I don't want to read everything. I'm just going to read some of the key things. It says, Madam Speaker, this is what he referred to last year's budget. This budget is risky, is dangerous, and is irresponsible deficit budget. It is risky, dangerous, and irresponsible because it fails to deal with the fiscal consolidation. It fails to deal with the realities of the economic situation. It fails to follow on the path that the government inherited when they came into power in June. Who would want to follow the path of failure? I will tell you why, Madam Speaker. Let us look at some of the ratios that are important to the economy, is important to the country, important. The government is not a gamble. It's not a business. It's not dealing in shares, and it's not in speculation. When you have a business dealing with shares, there is a silly notion that government is business. Government cannot be business. He then goes on to say, Madam Speaker, no same thing, but the country is overburdened. Too much tax, Madam Speaker. I will challenge the Prime Minister again to tell the public that he's going to do with VAT, because I'm going to provide to you my simple arithmetic, that mathematics, that the yield that the government has proposed on VAT cannot be correct. And if they maintain the same level of goods and goods as exempt goods and at a 12.5%, it is impossible. I'm going to prove that to you later, Madam Speaker. The government has foregone substantial VAT revenue, but they have kept the level of taxation the same. Why did they do so? They taxed the tourism. That is what they did. They taxed tourism, Madam Speaker. And regardless of how they were told the taxing tourism would have an impact on visitor arrival, all the studies show that. I have had discussions with the very important hoteliers that are alarmed at the government taxing of tourism. A Caribbean Development Bank study showed that the elastic travel, Madam Speaker, is such that when you tax the tourism, it has an effect on visitor arrivals. The government refuses to understand that, so as to say they are taking a risk. So they are risking taxing on tourism. Now, isn't that funny? And guess what happened? St. Lucia grew by the largest margin for last year with the new tax. But you know why, Mr. Speaker? Because there are people on the other side who keep on pretending they know an industry or understand economics, and they don't. And let me tell you why. Because when you increase the tax, the vast majority of people who come to St. Lucia buy what we call a vacation package. And that package includes the hotel, the airfare, and their tours. So when you take the increase in the tax, Mr. Speaker, it is spread out over a 10-day period. So it's $7.50 per person per day. Where St. Lucia is, that's not going to impact us. Furthermore, the $75 increase, right? The average person spends 10 per person. The average person spends 10 nights. So 10 nights by 7 is $7.50 per person per night. No, I said $7.50 per night per person on an average stay of 10 nights. Furthermore, as I've showed, the other countries are already charging that tax, and the airlines are the ones absorbing that rate. So I knew that there was no way that St. Lucia would be impacted. And in fact, so what we did is we transferred the tax that was being paid by the average man and woman. The people who couldn't even afford it were paying that 15% VAT. We transferred that. That money now went on the gas tax, and it went on to the airport. And revenue that we were not even generating. Now here's the problem, Mr. Speaker. We could have done even better than we did this year. But what happened is people like Mr. Pierre and other people questioned whether in fact we could have lowered the VAT and made up the revenue somewhere else. Okay? Lowering the VAT and increasing the tax on the airlines, they said that we were going to suffer. So what we had to do, Mr. Speaker, is we had to hold aside the revenue that we were generating from the gas tax and also from the airport, and we could not enter into a loan agreement because we agreed that we would hold that money back until we were able to prove that we were able to make up the revenue. So this year, what did it prove? It proved that the elasticity that he and other people were talking about didn't exist, and that fact that St. Lucia's tourism product is much stronger than they thought it was, and that the reduction in VAT, which was supposed to have lost 55 million, Mr. Speaker, only lost 27. And my prediction is with the money that we're going to be spending in capital expenditure over the next 3 years, that $27 million will be eliminated. Meaning that still staying at 12.5%, that we will collect as much money as we were collecting when we had 15%. No. I'm comparing like to like. And I want to remind the member, we said we're going to reduce it, eliminate it, and replace it with a less oppressive tax. Yeah, go and look at it. It's right there. But that's the part you didn't want to hear. It's like when we talk about affordable health care and saying that people should pay a contribution for insurance and empower the people of this country. So I want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, that we are confident that the plans that we're continuing to implement for St. Lucia will resound to the benefit of everybody in this country, even the opposition. Yeah. And this idea that we're not listening, we are listening. We listen to everybody, but it doesn't mean that we necessarily have to agree. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the people of this country elected this government and me as leader to make those tough decisions. And as I indicated in my independence address, I'm not going to shy away from those tough decisions. I know what it is to make decisions that you don't necessarily have everybody on board. But once people then start feeling the benefit, they quickly understand and support you, and people's confidence will grow with this government. But I have to say to you, Mr. Speaker, before I leave, that there is absolutely no way that I could have accomplished or that we could have accomplished what we have if it wasn't for the team that I have. I want to say thank you to them because we have tough cabinet meetings. I think that everybody takes on their responsibility of recognizing that when we are in cabinet, we're not representing our constituencies, but we are a board, and that we're going to act collectively. And I think that we are gaining each other's trust to know that we're not going to make decisions outside of that cabinet, and that there's going to be consensus. I also want to thank the technocrats and the civil servants that have been working with us. The hard work that they've been. I want to thank the opposition. Okay, because the opposition is doing what they're supposed to do. And as long as the public of St. Lucia recognizes that. And all I'm saying is that when it comes to the opposition, the only difficulty I have sometimes, Mr. Speaker, only difficulty I have sometimes is the hypocrisy. So when they're in government, they do one thing, and when they're now in opposition, they're proclaiming somebody else. And they want people to hold them to a different standard. I wanted to be able to go in, Mr. Speaker, tonight with regard to the Jafali affair. Because there's still things that people don't understand, and that we don't understand. So when the member from Castries South again wants to continue to give me or our party advice, it's always tempered. Because he's the person that introduced Jafali to St. Lucia. And we know he's supposed to be here. He was invited to be here. Supposed to be here. So you can pass the message on to him. But when he was there, I want to know, and the people of this country want to know, what did we get from Jafali? So we know that Jafali was made an ambassador, and he was supposed to do these miraculous things at IMO. He never went to the IMO for the meetings. So when he became the ambassador, in addition to being able to get what we believe was the immunity from his divorce case, the first thing that he did as an ambassador, he was entitled to buy cars. So he bought 2 cars in the UK. He bought 2 cars for himself. Ambassador Jafali. So he bought a car for himself and he bought a car for his wife. So he bought a Rolls Royce for himself and he bought a Maserati for his wife. In addition to that, he used the facilities of the High Commission in order to get 4 diplomatic passports for staff members. So he had 2 Filipinos and 2 Saudis as workers in the house that were facilitated by him being an ambassador. So I'm saying to you, here's a gentleman who got his immunity. He got to buy cars and saved thousands of dollars in taxes, and also got the benefit of having his staff. He then turned around and paid for somebody to operate out of the office to work for him. Okay? So the question becomes, where did St. Lucia get what it's supposed to get? The only thing I see that St. Lucia got was wind pies. We got the promise of some kind of investment. So here's a person, Mr. Hilaire, who obviously failed in his due diligence of Mr. Jafali. He failed in his due diligence of Mr. Jafali. Because if he's saying that he did not know he was giving it for his immunity, clearly the evidence suggests that that's what he wanted it for. And the fact that he did nothing and generated nothing, also questions come as to why we gave this man the ambassador position in the first place. And what was the conversations and all this going around in terms of this investment? The next thing is that the member from Castries South, was also involved in Robert Ainsworth. So when you again do a simple due diligence, so here's a gentleman, the gentleman who was going to come and buy 3,000 acres of land in St. Lucia. He was going to build a factory, a pharmaceutical factory, 1,000 acres. And he was 3,000 acres. No, one in Vieux Fort, in order to do the factory. That's what it was. Want me read it for you? I want me read. It's 1,000 acres for Vieux Fort. So he had 1,000 acres for Vieux Fort to do a factory. Then guess what the government did? The government then turned around and put the same member in as the chairman of CIP. Okay? So we're supposed to have confidence in this gentleman to do the due diligence. What did he then do? He wants to change it around, but the fact is a fact. He appointed his best friend's wife as a CEO, a person who has no track record in CIP, who has no track record in due diligence.
Honourable Prime Minister, you should summarize now.
No problem. But what did he do? He wants to question the two other people that we put there. The person who is the chairman of the CIP is a person who has developed a development bank, has been an auditor, has been involved in doing due diligence his whole life. And then we have now a CEO who actually was a financial regulator of this country, who worked in a bank with regards to compliance. So those are the same skills that you need for CIP. These are not yes people. These are not people who are associated to any political party. So I just want to end with this, because there are a lot of innuendos that are thrown out to us. So, Mr. Speaker, it seems that the opposition leader has recently discovered a love for alteration. He gave the V word a break this time, his vindictive word, around, and has adopted the F word instead. F for foreigners, friends and family. He seems to have forgotten that F is also for the first letter for the word failure, which is the one they should be more accustomed to, which perfectly defines his party's last term in office. But let's break down the foreigners, friends, and family. The SLP has been cultivating in St. Lucia a hate and a fear of foreigners. The word for particular disease is called xenophobia. You heard them try to scare the people of the South that we are giving away all the land to foreigners. On the other hand, Mr. Speaker, they have threatened to warn foreign investors away from St. Lucia because they were not in office. The same thing again tonight. Not only were they threatening foreigners, Mr. Speaker, but again, I didn't catch the last words of the member from Vieux Fort South when he sat down, but it certainly seemed to me that he was again threatening me. But again, I'm accustomed to that, because in the elections, it was not UWP against Labour, it was the Chastanets against Labour. Personalizing everything, bringing in people in who are not involved in politics. But they don't know better. That's all they know how to do. So they would seek to ruin St. Lucia's image overseas for their own selfish motives. And they wondered why they could not have a successful CIP program. Do they ever think about the damage, the things they say or do to the reputation of the country? Friends and family. The American writer Rich Bosch said that the bond that links your true family is not one of blood, but of respect and joy in each other's life. We all come from different walks of life in St. Lucia, raised under different roofs, but we're all part of one St. Lucian family. Well, the United Workers' Party considers the people of St. Lucia to be all part of our family. And what do you do for your St. Lucian family? You give them affordable health care. If they are young, you teach them skills and prepare them for the world ahead. It makes me wonder, Mr. Speaker, how does St. Lucia Labour Party see the people of St. Lucia? They are our family and friends. Does that mean that they are your enemies? Then again, these days on the other side of the house, their once sworn enemies have become their friends very quickly. But I respect all the people of St. Lucia are our family, and we will not let you down. Our country will succeed and be resilient, and we will do it together as one St. Lucian family. I thank you very, very much.
Honorable members, the question is that the Appropriation 2018-2019 bill be read a second time. I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to provide for the services of the State of St. Lucia for the year ending on the 31st day of March 2019.
Honorable members, honorable members, clause 2.
Appropriation of $1,487,583,200 for the services of the State of St. Lucia for the year 2018-2019.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Schedule.
Section 2.
Schedule stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Honorable members, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable members, I beg to report that the Appropriation 2018-2019 bill went through committee stage with no amendments. Honorable member for Mekot South, Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs, and Public Service.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Honorable members, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Appropriation 2018-2019 bill be read a third time and passed. I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Appropriation Act 2018-2019.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that the House be adjourned, sine die.
Honorable members, before I put a question, let me take the opportunity to thank you for your cooperation. In my childhood days, I was told that all the time I visited rivers, that if you wanted to learn to swim, you just had to jump into the river. And I guess being an elected speaker, I was thrown right away into the deep end of the House of Assembly and being challenged right away by a good friend member for ancillary canneries, if you understand what I mean. So I'd like to thank you very much for your cooperation. I would also like to thank the staff of the Parliament for being here throughout. Also to the police officers who keep us safe and provide us security. Also to the staff of the GIS. I'm hoping that honorable members will continue in a good spirit of bipartisanship and as very well, and that both sides of this House will cooperate, not just with me, but with each other. Honorable members, I now put a question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. This House sits in adjourned.